Morning, everyone. My name is Shazia Khan, and today's learning outcome that we'll be doing is learning outcome 2, and the unit is aspects of human physiology, to understand that homeostasis is the key process which maintains the internal environment of the body. And before I go on to learning outcome 2, I want to just give you uh, a refresher of what we did in learning outcome 1, so you've got a little bit of an idea, and just summarize what we did in the last learning outcome, which is learning outcome 1. So in learning outcome 1, we looked at understanding that the human body comprises of different organ systems, and we looked at levels of organization. We looked at the different types of tissues. So we had connective tissue, epithelial tissue, muscle tissue, nervous tissue. And then we went to look at the different organs. So we gave an example of looking at the heart. We went then on to look at the 12 organ systems in the human body, which was, we looked at some, which was firstly the nervous system and what that did, and how there's two parts to the nervous system, the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system, and we went through that. We also looked at the digestive system and what that includes, so things like the mouth, the throat, the stomach, small intestine, large intestine, rectum, anus, etc. We then went on to look at the cardiovascular system. Excuse me, and what that's used for, to supply the blood throughout the body. And again, we then went on to look at the respiratory system in regards to what that does with the and what it includes. So the respiratory system includes the nose, the mouth, lungs, windpipe, voice box, etc. We then went on to look at the excretory system and what that comprises of, like things like the kidneys, urania, bladder, etc. We went on to look at the endocrine system, and with each of the system, we had a video there available for you to look at in your own time as well. We then went on to 1.1 and we looked at describing the levels of organization within an organism. And we looked at atoms, molecules, and cells, tissues, organs, and organ systems, an organism. We then went on to look at the different levels of organization in the body, from the simplest to the most complex, and where atoms fitted, molecules, cells, tissues, organs, organ systems, and the human. We looked at level 1, which were the cells. We looked at level 2, which was the tissues. We looked at level 3, which was the organs, and level 4, which was the organ systems. We then went on to 1.2 and we looked at describing examples of the major systems in the human body. And here we looked at the elements of then we went on to look at the 11 major organ systems: circulatory system, respiratory system, digestive system, nervous system, endocrine system, which we looked at earlier as well, immune system, muscular system, skeletal system, integumentary system, urinary system, and reproductive system in more detail. We then went on to look at 1.3, which was to explain the relationship between structure and function within the organ system. And we looked at how they work together, each organ, like the digestive system with how it works with the nervous system, or the function within the circulatory system, respiratory and circulatory system. We also then looked at how nervous system and the muscular system work together, and the endocrine and various systems, and integumentary, which is the skin, and the immune systems, how they work together, and the urinary and circulatory systems. And then we looked at the fight or flight response, why that was so important in regards to looking at the different organs in our body. So that was learning outcome 2. Now we're looking at learning outcome 2, which is to understand that homeostasis, the key principle which maintains the internal environment of the body, and look at that in regards to the elements of that. So the key indicative content is homeostasis, positive and negative feedback mechanisms, examples of control, blood glucose, osmorregulation, the endocrine system and the hormonal control. And we're going to look at the location of the key glands and the action of insulin and glucose in the blood sugar levels. So key terminology, what is homeostasis? So in biology, homeostasis is the state of internal, physical, chemical, and social conditions maintained by living things. The concept of homeostasis has been applied to ecological settings, first proposed by Canadian-born American ecologist Robert McCarthy in 1955. Homeostasis in ecosystems, product of biodiversity in regards to elements of the state of the body and how the body systems needed to survive and function clearly. So it involves, homeostasis involves 3 systems: the receptor, control center, and effector, and how they work together to help the body in balancing by noticing changes, then acting on control your body streams. An example of the process, so the stimulus would be something like an imbalance in the body that brings about change. So you'd hear your body temperature rises, and the receptor is where the tracks your environment and spots changes that notifies the control setting. So that's your nerve cells getting signal and sending it. And then control center is defined the normal balance. So that's where your brain starts the process of controlling your temperature. And then effector causes your blood to react in order to correct any kind of imbalance. So that's your blood vessels widen and your sweat glands give gland. So in a state of homeostasis, body levels are constantly rising and falling in response to changes outside and inside your body, and some of the systems self-regulate to stay at normal levels, such as things like we mentioned on the slides as well: your blood sugar, your blood pressure, your energy, your acid levels, oxygen, proteins, temperature, hormones, electrolytes. So an example of homeostasis is any bodily system imbalance reaches a steady state that can withstand outside forces of change. When this system is disturbed, controlling devices built into the body react to a new balance. So, you know, it's elements of your body, your blood pressure, your body energy, your body temperature. Homeostasis is regulation of the blood sugar. So glucose homeostasis refers to the hormonal and neutral regulatory mechanism that maintain glucose levels within a very narrow range. In healthy individuals, the body regulates glucose release and production in order to ensure sufficient glucose flux to meet the demands by the body. Together, insulin and glucagon help maintain homeostasis, where conditions inside the body hold steady. When a person's blood sugar is too high, their pancreas secretes more insulin. When their blood sugar levels drop, the pancreas release glucagon to raise them. So they have a huge impact on the blood levels as well. So the concentration of glucose, as we mentioned, in the blood must be kept at a set point. The concentration of glucose in a person's blood can increase after they have eaten a meal. and a meal containing lots of carbohydrates for diabetics. The concentration of glucose in a person's blood can decrease after a period of exercise or if they have not eaten for a long while. Glucose diffuses out of the blood into muscles, cells, and is broken down to release energy from muscle contractions. If the blood glucose concentration rises, as mentioned earlier, too high, then the cells can lose water. This may interfere with cell activities. If the blood glucose concentration falls too much, then the body cells will not receive as much glucose and so will not be able to release so much energy in the respiration. The concentration of glucose in the blood is regulated by the action of the hormones, insulin and glucagon. These hormones are made in the pancreas and act in the cells in the liver. So the liver acts as the body's glucose reservoir. When the blood glucose concentration gets too high, liver cells can take in glucose and store it. So when the blood glucose concentration gets too low, liver cells can release glucose in the body to change this. So we could see from that diagram the issue, the homeostasis and the liver, how they are the stimulus and how the blood glucose is the final, the level, and then it just goes round as well. And then the pituitary gland, the thyroid gland in the diagram, the adrenal gland, the pancreas, the ovary and the testicles in that diagram. So we've explained the process a little bit there in regards to the element of psychological environment to stability. So the liver, pancreas and the kidneys and the brain help maintain homeostasis. The liver is responsible for metabolizing toxic substances, and with signaling from pancreas maintains carbohydrate metabolism. The liver also helps to regulate lipid metabolism and in primary state of cholesterol production. The kidneys are responsible for regulating blood water levels, absorption of substances in the blood, maintenance of salt and iron levels in the blood, regulation of blood pH and excretion of urea and other waste products. Excuse me. Excuse me. The hypothalamus is involved in the regulation of body temperatures, heart rate, blood pressure, and circadian rhythms. Excuse me. Homeostasis can be influenced by internal or existing conditions, intrinsic or external. So internal or external factors can be a part of this. And also, you know, the fact that elements of that can be used in that when it comes to homeostasis. You know, we look at the elements of external factors and internal factors, and is maintained by many different mechanisms. External factors of homeostasis can be things like temperature, humidity, and altitude that can affect homeostasis by putting stress on the body. Other factors such can be things like exposure to toxins, infections, injuries, and can disrupt the homeostasis. The internal conditions are the ability of body to maintain a constant internal environment. For example, temperature and blood glucose concentration maintains optimal conditions for enzymes. External factors include, you know, obviously the elements that we've just discussed. And an example is that sometimes if the external temperature is too cold, then the blood vessels constrict and enable the body to retain heat. So a sensor of receptor that detects changes in the internal or external environment, as we've just mentioned. Another example is peripheral chemoreceptors, which detects changes in blood pH. And the integrating center or control center receives information from the sensors and initiates this response to maintain homeostasis. The most important example is hypothalamus, region of the brain that controls everything from body temperature to heart rate, blood pressures, and circadian rhythms. So an effector is an organ, as we mentioned earlier, or tissue that receives information from the integrated center. The maintenance of a constant internal environment by the body obviously is called homeostasis, and factors could be, like we mentioned earlier, the blood pressure, blood temperature, blood glucose level, or body water levels as well could have an impact on it. So changes in the internal and external environment could be also things like the homeostasis resist changes in the internal body, which we mentioned. So the body will respond against the change and keep conditions near the normal. For example, like we mentioned, the glucose rising in the blood after a meal. Homeostasis also resists changes in external environment. Like we said, for example, if the temperature of the air rises, then the body will detect this and activate cooling mechanisms. The change in external environment may also lead to change in internal environment, which increases things like the blood pressure, blood temperature, which will further activate homeostatic mechanisms. Homeostatic is also based on negative feedback, which we'll look a little bit later on at. When conditions have moved away from the normal, negative feedback returns them back to the ideal set point. Some main examples that I mentioned earlier, blood glucose, body temperature, and water levels are the examples of homeostasis, the key examples. So homeostatic regulation of temperature. So regulation of body conditions of homeostasis include hormone balance, blood sugar levels, body temperature, and many other body conditions. Temperatures, homeostasis is achieved at a range of 37 to 37.8 degrees Celsius. And negative feedback here. Negative feedback mechanisms use one of the products of reaction to reduce the output activity process for the purpose of returning organs or systems to the normal range of functioning. Core temperatures maintained at normal set point, which I mentioned, 37 degrees. If the core temperature rises or drops, the set point internal biological responses are initiated to return the core temperature back to the set point range. Once this is achieved, negative feedback loops are initiated down, regulate the internal biological responses so that the core temperature doesn't overshoot the required one. And there's also feedback from other temperature receptors, but the skin receptors are the most common. It's important to maintain temperature by enzyme. And body temperature is one of the most factors that are controlled during homeostasis. And the process, as we said, if the temperature is around 37 degrees, this process is controlled by the thermoregulatory center, which is contained by the hypothalamus in the brain, and it contains receptors sensitive to the temperature of the blood. The skin also has temperature receptors and sends nervous impulses back to the thermoregulatory center. As we said, when it does get so when it does get too hot, the sweat glands in the skin release more sweat, and this evaporates, transferring heat energy from the skin to the environment. When it gets too cold, then the skeletal muscles contract rapidly and we shiver. These contractions need energy from respiration, and some is released as heat. So the negative feedback. So negative feedback mechanism is an important type of control that is found in homeostasis. It responds when conditions change from the ideal or set point and returns conditions to this set point. There's a continuous cycle of events in a negative feedback. In general, this works in the following way. So if the level of something rises, control reduces it again. If the level of something falls, control raises it again. An example of negative feedback is your body temperature is controlled by hypothalamus in the brain. If the hypothalamus detects the body is too hot, the response is that the body begins to sweat to try and reduce the temperature back to the correct level. Once the body temperature is back to the correct level, sweating will stop. In the opposite way, if the hypothalamus detects that the body is too cold, then the response is that the body begins to shiver and try to raise the temperature back to the correct level. Once the body temperature is back to the correct level, the shivering will then stop. So this is an example of it. Another example could be it could be the element of the main example, obviously, is the element of sweating, where the temperature reaches to normal range as well. So it could be another example of negative feedback could be the things like blood glucose, your menstrual cycle. The blood glucose would be in humans, a blood glucose level 4 grams or roughly 1 teaspoon is essential for normal function. And the body's positive and negative feedback loops keep glucose levels within the narrow range. Whenever blood sugars rise or fall, the body will respond by releasing hormones that either turn on or turn off the release of glucose from the liver to keep the levels stable. Then we've got positive feedback in regards to homeostasis. So the positive feedback occurs in the nature when the product of a reaction leads to an increase in that reaction. If we look at system in homeostasis, a positive feedback moves the system further away from the target of the equilibrium. Positive, so feedback serves to intensify response until an endpoint is reached. So example of processes controlled by positive feedback in the human body include things like blood clotting or childbirth. So when a wound causes bleeding, the body responds. Body responds with a positive feedback loop to clot the blood and stop blood loss. Substances released by the injured blood vessel wall begin the process of blood clotting. Platelets in the blood start to cling in the injured site and release chemicals that attract additional platelets. As the platelets continue to amass, more of the chemicals are released and more platelets are attracted to the site of clot. The positive feedback accelerates the process of clotting until the clot is large enough to stop the bleeding. And then the next one is childbirth, another example. So in regards to childbirth, the positive feedback loop that controls childbirth. The process normally begins with the head of the infant pushes against the cervix, and this stimulates nerve impulses which travel from the cervix to the hypothalamus in the brain. In response, the hypothalamus sends the hormone oxytocin to the pituitary gland, which secretes it into the bloodstream so it can be carried to the uterus. Oxytocin stimulates uterine contractions, which push the baby harder against the cervix. In response, the cervix starts to dilate in preparation for the passage of the baby, and the cycle of positive feedback continues with increasing levels of oxytocin, stronger uterine contractions, and wider dilation of the cervix until the baby is pushed through the birth canal and out of the body. At that point, the cervix is no longer simulated to send nerve impulses to the brain, and the entire process stops. So these are some of the examples, and also in the slides there's some examples that have been given here, which I went through blood clotting and childbirth as well. Next one is the positive feedback mechanism of the blood clotting cascade. So in positive feedback, a later enzyme in the clotting cascade either enables or greatly accelerates an early step, as I mentioned earlier. In terms of systems structure, these reactions are very complex, and it seems like they could be evolved by natural selection only if they provided a substantial benefit. So in mechanism of blood clotting, when tissue is torn or injured, a chemical is released. This chemical causes platelets, as I mentioned earlier, in the blood to activate. And once these platelets are activated, they release a chemical that signals more platelets to activate until the wound is clotted. Blood clotting is, as we mentioned earlier, is maintained by positive feedback, as clotting is amplified in response by increasing the amount of clotting factors when clotting factors are present. So, this has to be taken into account that this is the main mechanism. When someone is injured, a blood vessel wall to break platelets are activated then. There's a 4-step process to stop bleeding after injury, and the body works to form a plug at the injured site. So you'll have vessel constriction, the primary hemostasis, and the secondary hemostasis, and then stable clot formed. So these are intrinsic factors such as damage or injury activated the cleavage of zymogen proteins in the blood clotting cascade. Activation of zymogen thrombin begins the formation of fibroclotting network and also elicits positive feedback that further upregulates the entire clotting cascade. Next one we're going to look at is the endocrine system, and we looked at this in learning outcome 1 as well. So we'll just go through the endocrine system. So the endocrine system consists of tissues, mainly glands, that create and release hormones, as the diagram shows as well. Hormones are chemicals that coordinate different functions in your body by carrying messages through your blood to your organs, skin, muscles, and other tissues. These signals tell the body what to do and when to do it. Hormones are essential for life and your health. The main function of your endocrine system is to release hormones into your blood while continuously monitoring the levels. Hormones deliver their messages by locking into cells. They target so they can relay the message. You have more than 50 different hormones and they affect nearly all aspects of your health, directly or indirectly. Some examples are things like, metabolism, growth and development, sexual function, reproduction, etc. The endocrine system consists of 3 types of tissue: endocrine glands, organs, and endocrine-related tissues. Endocrine glands are special tissues in your body that create release substances. Endocrine make and release hormones directly into your bloodstream. And the endocrine glands in your body from head to toe include things like your pineal gland, which is a tiny gland in your body, in your brain, sorry. Pituitary gland, this is a pea-sized gland at the base of your brain, below your hypothalamus. Thyroid gland, this small butterfly-shaped gland at the front of your neck, underneath your skin. Parathyroid gland, these are 4 pea-sized glands that typically behind your thyroid. Adrenal glands, these are small triangle glands on top of each of your 2 kidneys. Certain organs in your body also make and release hormones. An organ is a group of tissues that form a structure that performs a specific important function in your body. There are hundreds of conditions related to issues with the endocrine system. Hormone imbalances make a significant number of endocrine diseases. This typically means that there's too much or not enough of one or more hormones. But issues directly affecting the endocrine system, glands, and organs like benign and cancerous tumors also account for endocrine diseases. The endocrine system related conditions can be things like, diabetes, type 1, type 2, gestational diabetes, metabolic syndrome, obesity. It could be endocrine cancers and tumors, thyroid, sexual development, calcium and bone conditions. So it's really important to bear in mind that there's different conditions that fall within the endocrine system in regards to how it works and how it, uses different hormones for the element of the organ system. So the next, so let me just. So there are 3 main functions of the endocrine system, which I mentioned just a bit ago. Just to clarify, it's blood sugar control, which is the insulin, differentiation, growth, and function of reproduction. Organs, so the testosterone and estradiol, and the body growth and energy production, which is growth hormone, and thyroid hormone, which I mentioned a little bit earlier on, so that you've got a little bit of an idea about it. And it's very important to maintain that your endocrine system is healthy. If it's not healthy, you need to get plenty of exercise, eat nutritiously, get regular medication, get any supplements, and check your diabetes all the time. And the next one is a video here, and this looks at the endocrine system and how it impacts on the human body. So have a look at that in your own time. 2.1, explain the concept of homeostasis. So homeostasis is a self-regulated process by which an organism tends to maintain stability while adjusting to conditions that are best for its survival. If homeostasis is successful, life continues. If homeostasis is unsuccessful, it results in a disaster or death of the organism. So it's really important to maintain, maintain stability when it comes to homeostasis. The failure of homeostatic function in an internal environment will result in illnesses of diseases. In severe cases, it can lead to death and disability. The most common ones are things like genetics, physical condition, diet and nutrition, which I mentioned earlier, venoms and toxins, psychological health, and side effects of medicines and any medical procedures as well. The main primary concept of homeostasis is to maintain a balance within the body regarding the temperature, salt concentration, food intake, and pH levels as well. So it's really important that, you know, these feedback mechanisms involve sensors and receptors, and also, you know, make sure that you are on top of things as well. And the receptor and the control center and effector. So the receptor receives information on the changing environment, the control center processes the information received by the receptor, and the effector responds to commands of the control center by enhancing or opposing the stimulus. So it's really important to keep on top of your body, you know, the element of how your body works, and make sure that, you know, it's balanced as well, and that internal external factors are taken into place when you are looking at monitoring and maintaining this element of you know, being healthy and trying to control your you know, your element of your body responding to the temperature, you know, because homeostasis does have both physiological and behavioral responses. So in terms of behavior, you might seek out warm clothes or a patch of sunlight if you feel chilly. Again, you might also curl your body inward and keep your arms tucked in to close your body to keep yourself warm. And as endotherms, people also have a number of internal systems that we mentioned to regulate body temperature. So, you know, it's really important that that homeostasis, and, you know, you maintain your mind as well. So it has issues to do with your mental health as well. The concept of homeostasis applies to living organisms, which single-celled organisms to complex multicellular organisms. In summary, homeostasis is the ability of the body to maintain a stable internal environment despite changes in the external environment, as we mentioned earlier. So there's a huge amount of changes. It achieved through a complex network of feedback mechanisms that monitor and regulate various physiological parameters to maintain optimal conditions for life. Explain At 2.2, explain how endocrine system is well suited to maintaining homeostasis. So the endocrine system maintains homeostasis through a series of feedback loops, the most important which are controlled by hypothalamus interacting with the pituitary gland. Often the hypothalamus simulates the pituitary gland to secrete and activate in hormone to another gland. The endocrine system uses hormones to allow the body to respond to the stimuli, and, you know, stimulus are changes in the environment inside the body, as we mentioned, internal and external factors. The endocrine system plays a critical role in regulation of homeostasis by executing a vastly complex network of molecule signaling mechanisms that communicate information in the form of hormones released by cells. The hormone signals in turn simulate organ system to restore homeostasis. So it's really important that they work together, and the endocrine hormones also help control mood, growth, and development, the way our organs work, metabolism, the reproduction, and the endocrine system regulates how much of each hormone is released, and this depends on the levels of hormone already in the body or levels of the other substances in the body, like calcium. So secondly, the endocrine system is tightly regulated through feedback mechanism. This means that when the body's internal environment deviates from its optimal state, the endocrine responds by adjusting with the secretion of hormones to bring the body back into balance. For example, blood glucose levels rise after a meal, which we mentioned earlier. The pancreas release insulin to stimulate the uptake, and cells bring blood levels back to normal. Similarly, when the blood calcium levels fall below a certain threshold, the parathyroid glands release parathyroid hormone PTH to stimulate the release of calcium from bones and increase calcium absorption from the intestines, thereby increasing blood calciums. Finally, the endocrine system works in concert with other physiological systems, such as nervous system and the immune system, to maintain homeostasis. For example, if you're during a stressful response, the homeostasis in the brain activates the sympathetic nervous system and adrenal glands to release hormones such as adrenaline and cortisol, which increase heart rate, blood pressure, and blood glucose, and preparing for a body for a fight or flight response, which we looked at in learning outcome 1. So in response, the endocrine system is well suited to maintaining homeostasis due to the ability of regulating physiological process through the release of hormones, its tight regulation through feedback mechanism, and its coordination of the physiological system. So we've looked at now finished learning outcome 2, where we've looked at understanding the homeostasis in the key process which maintains the internal environment on the body. We looked at what homeostasis is. So just to give you a summary of learning outcome 2, we've looked at what homeostasis is, positive and negative feedback mechanisms with reference to examples such as blood glucose, osmoregulation. We looked at what the endocrine system was in detail, and looked at the endocrine system and hormonal control. We looked at the location of key glands. We looked at the regulation of blood sugars, and we looked at homeostasis regulation of temperature in the body as well, positive, negative feedback. And we also looked at the concept of homeostasis and how is well suited to maintaining homeostasis. So that was a quick summary of what we did in learning outcome 2. So this is some of the references that have been used for learning outcome 2. And there's some links there that you can go on and some books and some additional reading that is available on Moodle for you. So if you want to go on Moodle, there's additional reading for you available. The learning outcome 1 has been recorded and uploaded onto Moodle, and this will be put onto Moodle as well for you to do the next session. Plenary, refer to ebooks and journals on Moodle for this unit. As I've just mentioned, additional reading. There's some further reading and a link there on homeostasis, what it is, how it works, and the functions of homeostasis, and some with reference to some examples. So if you have any questions or any queries, to email learnerwork@ukvarsity.co.uk. Submission of the assignment is to be done on learnerwork@ukvarsity.co.uk, and that is after 2 weeks of completion of the unit. So now we've done learning outcome 1 and 2, which will be available on Moodle for you, recorded. The next session we are doing is the final session, which is the assignment discussion session. And here we'll be looking at the assignment. The assignment brief and the module spec is available on Moodle for you if you need to go onto it and have a look. So thank you for attending today's session, and I will see you in the next session, which is the assignment discussion session. Thank you.